I am showing noon on the dot, so we will go ahead and kick things off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Andy Frisky. I am a senior dream curator here at Dream Bank. On behalf of the entire team, so thrilled to have you all with us here today. A couple housekeeping items before we go ahead and kick things off. In the chat box is where you will type any sort of pertinent questions that you may have for Erika during her presentation. And we always like to poll the audience as we kind of kick things off too. If you were comfortable sharing where you are tuning in from, we're always curious and like to see that sort of feedback. So go ahead and pop in the chat where you are watching this from today. I'm in downtown Madison, Wisconsin. It's pretty sunny here. Autumnal vibes are alive and well too. It's a balmy 60 degrees. So excited about that. Jacksonville, Florida. Thanks so much for sharing that, Julie, as well. But yeah, a little bit of context about DreamBank as to who we are and why we exist. So here at American Family Insurance, we believe that communities are stronger and the future is brighter when people are actively pursuing their dreams. And that's why DreamBank was created just over 10 years ago. It's an inspirational community destination and virtual experience that is dedicated to dreamers everywhere. Our offerings are designed to help you celebrate the dream journey, to overcome obstacles, and to stay motivated. I will go ahead and drop a link in the chat a little bit through this presentation about some of our other upcoming events that we have. But really excited about this featured speaker today, Erika Andresen. So Erika is going to talk about business continuity and why it's important. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Erika. Erika, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, everybody who showed up because you want to hear me talk about something that's going to be super important to your company and your business, regardless of what stage you are in at this moment. You could not even have started a business yet, and this is actually the perfect time. Every time is the perfect time, but if you're starting business continuity early, that is awesome. You get that practice in early, you keep it throughout. If you've not done it yet, this is the first time you're hearing of it, congratulations, welcome to World Business Continuity. It is going to be something that you're going to really get a lot out of, and it's really going to help keep your business alive. So I'm going to start sharing my screen straight away. And alrighty. All right. So I got to close me because I get distracted. There we go. Okay. So understand, I can't see your comments. Andy's going to be taking care of that and letting me know anything that pops up that I may need to know in the meanwhile. I'm intending to keep Q&A for the end. So I find that sometimes if I get asked a question, I'm like, if you could wait one slide, the answer's coming up. But don't let that stop you from putting the questions in as they come up as I'm going through. So we're going to talk about how you're going to keep your small business alive and thriving, and why I get to talk to you is I'm a subject matter expert in business continuity. I am a certified business continuity professional through DRI. DRI is one of two international organizations that certify for this practice. I am a professor of emergency management for the University of Texas in El Paso for their Masters of Public Administration program, so it's a graduate program. I wrote a book called How to Not Kill Your Business, Grow Your Business in Any Environment, Navigate Volatility, and Successfully Recover When Things Go Wrong. It's basically all about business continuity for the small business owner. I am a veteran, and it was actually in Afghanistan that I became inspired to do what I do. So I was reading a business review article on businesses that had suffered through Superstorm Sandy, and they were all asked the same question, with the final question being, what are you doing to prepare for next time? And every single one of them, except one, said, oh, this isn't going to happen again. And I was like, I so wish I could help you by putting some knowledge in that brain so you could keep your dream alive. And that's really what inspires me to do what I do, and I do for you. So everybody thinks they have their ducks in a row. You have your marketing dialed in, you have your sales dialed in, and that you think your product's dialed in, and that's all well and good. But what if you don't have doors to open? What if you are unable to provide your services? All of that is for naught. So you have underneath you, like the duck, the calm on top, but your feet are going crazy trying to stay afloat because there's this discontinuity you're not exactly aware of, but is pervasive throughout either your personal company or the industry. And if you're aware of these things, it makes it a much easier time for you and your company. So it sneaks into your business and sabotages your efforts. And really ask the question, so what are you going to do if you have a fire or there's flooding in your area? How are you going to be continuous? How are you going to still provide your services and keep yourself and your employees employed? So there was a report of small businesses in one of the most expensive years for disasters, which is 2021. It was $20 billion of damage to businesses. And of those businesses, 46% have said that they're doing nothing to prepare for the next one. That concerns me. And I bet you've already felt the pain of being kicked in the bank account, because growth is not continuous. Growth is not linear. You can have stutter stops. So as you are doing your business, as you are growing your business, as you're starting your business, you're going to have starts and stops. What business continuity does is it helps those stops and starts either not happen or makes a minimum at best. So really what business continuity is business resiliency. And let's get everything set when we discuss what resiliency is. So the definition of resiliency is the capacity to recover quickly and the ability to bounce back into shape. Now, these two terms are interconnected, and the best way for me to explain how is through an analogy. Now, when you have an auditorium that says it has a 500-seat capacity, but you only have 300 people, you do not have the ability to meet the capacity. You are under that. And if you have 600 people and you have 500 seats, you don't have the capacity to fit that either. So what business continuity really tries to do is bridge the gap between the two, so your capacity and your ability match each other, so you can be resilient and you can be continuous. So businesses, especially small businesses, are the heart of a community. And when they disappear or then they have to close, the indirect effect to the economy and the social fabric is much worse than the direct effects. So because all businesses provide key services. Why a business even starts is to provide a service through a product or through an actual service. They also provide employment for everybody in the community, whoever it is that's working there. And when the community has businesses leave, the community dies. Why is that? Because businesses not only provide services, but they provide tax revenue. They also are a draw for residents to come into the area. So you'll notice in a lot of real estate listings, they'll say, this is where this house is, and it is a 5-minute drive from shops. Businesses are really vital to a community for those reasons. They are a draw for the residents to come in. And if there's more residents, there's more of a draw for business to invest in the community. And everybody is entitled to having their dreams fulfilled. And that is business owners. Business owners should be allowed to have their dreams go on because they know how to keep their business continuous. They are then paying their employees money, so the employees are actually able to pay for the things that are necessities like food and rent, but they also get to pay for things that are luxuries, which they get from other dreamers who are other business owners, which is why this is a very important matter to my heart. I am super big on everybody being able to have what they rightfully deserve. And if I can empower business owners to stay in business by educating them about business continuity, then I feel like I've done a really big part in allowing that wonderful cycle to continue. So some of you have never heard of business continuity. You are not alone. You really are not. It is something that a majority of mid and small size businesses don't know about, but it is something that's been practiced for decades in other areas. Large international corporations do this. Banking, financial institutions do this. Critical infrastructure in the government does this because it is really important for them to stay alive. Same thing with higher education institutions. They do it because they are like their own versions of little towns and cities, because parents send their children there to live and grow and learn. So there is an extra pressure on them, so to speak, to make sure that everything goes smoothly and everything is operational in the event something happens. Of course, nothing happens outside in the community that doesn't impact them. Just because there's a gate doesn't mean it doesn't impact them as well. So business continuity picks up where risk management fails. Now, an example I like to give is if you're driving, risk management is you have you know, you want to go from A to B. And there is a map that has an overlay of the potholes on either side of the road. It's a 2-lane highway. So that is your risk management. You know what lane you need to be in to avoid the massive potholes. But what if there is an accident? What if there's a rock slide? What if there are cattle in the road? You don't know when any of this is going to be cleared up, but you still have to get to your destination by a certain time. If you've done business continuity, you pull over, you pop open your trunk, you pull out a bucket of asphalt and the shovel you have, and you start filling in that pothole so you can be on your merry way. That is what business continuity does. It enables you to get to your goal with the least amount of discomfort possible. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there's a huge failure rate for new businesses. The failure rate is actually higher when it is small business. 90% of small businesses will fail if within 2 years of facing a disaster. So that's disconcerting. If there's something you can do to prevent that from happening, business continuity is one of those things. So let's talk about risk in general. You're going to be doing a vulnerability assessment, which is how you determine what your risk is, and you have to be able to identify them. And I really, really like this picture because it's a really good way to explain how you do a vulnerability assessment. So you have a hazard and a risk. Now, if you are on the shore, getting ready to go in the water, and there's a shark there, that is the hazard of you going into the water. But as long as you stay on the sand, you are not at, that hazard is not a risk. You are not at risk of being impacted by that hazard. You have to be in the area of that risk. That changes the nexus. Now, another thing is, if you're in the water with that shark, yes, it is now a risk to you when it wasn't when you were on the shore. But you can do things that will mitigate that risk. You can wear a shark suit. You can be in a shark cage. These are things that now reduce that risk and its capacity to harm you greatly. So that's pretty much the basics of doing a vulnerability assessment with a risk. You figure out what hazards can potentially impact you, what is the likelihood of them impacting you, and then what you can do to make them less of a risk or the odds of less of that happening. Now, there are 4 ways you can deal with risk. And the first one is actually accept. You're going to accept the risk because you have decided it's not really that big of a risk to you. It's not going to impact you that much. Or maybe you just are adventurous and you don't think that it's going to happen to you. So if there's a 70% chance likelihood of something happening, you believe you're in that 30%. So you're like, I'm good. I'm just going to accept the risk and not have anything to do with it. A lot of heavy lifting comes with avoiding the risk because you're going to change your practices in how you deal with that risk. You're either going to do something that makes that risk go away altogether. So back to our shark in the water. You're going to avoid that risk by just not even going to the beach that day. That makes you change your plans drastically in order to avoid the risk. There's a lot of heavy lifting involved. You're also potentially going to reduce, which is mitigate the risk. And that is create things like control measures. So if you're worried about a fire, you're going to have a fire extinguisher. If you want to go into the water with sharks, you're going to wear a shark suit or get in a shark cage. That is going to mitigate that risk. The other option is to transfer the risk. Now, transferring the risk is done by contract with a third party. This is usually what happens when you don't have the ability or the resources to do it on your own. So you're going to pay someone else to take care of it. And the most common is insurance. A lot of people will get business insurance, especially for cyber crime still. Like, I got cyber risk insurance. Well, kind of like car insurance, all that does is transfer the financial burden of the risk. It doesn't actually get rid of the risk or its impacts to you. So think about it this way. When you get into a car accident, are you made whole instantly? No, you're not. You have to deal with the rigmarole of getting in touch with the other person's insurance company. Maybe they're underinsured, maybe they're not insured at all. Do you have rental coverage with your insurance? All of this stuff is a big pain in the butt, and you're not going to be able to have access to things the way that you want them in your normal life right away. And you're not even getting the money right away. It just helps you pay for it later. So there's some people will say, hey, I got insurance for that. It's a nice to have because it will help you financially, but you still have to address the underlying risk in order for you to be continuous. So again, when you're going through a risk assessment, you're going to try to find what are called single points of failure. Now, a single point of failure means if that thing ceases to happen, then your whole business just stops. So an example would be if you are the only person in your entire business that has the passwords and you are incapacitated for some reason. Maybe you got hit in the head and you're knocked out and you're in a coma. Maybe you died. Something happened to you. And that password is in your brain because you didn't tell anybody. That is a single point of failure because nobody else can access that stuff without great actions on their part, if at all, if they can even get to it. So that would be an example of a single point of failure. A control is something that you put in a place to prevent a single point of failure from happening. So again, if you have passwords, you're going to share the password with somebody else you trust. Not everybody, just the most necessary person possible, the person you want in your place if you are not available to do something. Another control measure would be something like a generator. So you have a backup generator to a key piece of machinery. Let's say your power goes out. If you don't have a generator, that is a single point of failure. A generator is a control measure that allows the operation to continue. Now, a recovery time objective, that is something that you're figuring out when you do a business impact analysis. Now, the first part I just did with the single point of failure and control, that is part of a risk assessment. That is the first major step in business continuity. The second is doing a business impact analysis. And the first major part of that is called the recovery time objective, the RTO. So you're going to look at every single one of your operations and say, which one of these do I need to be operational for 8 hours or more? So if something like you have one operation, if you're without it for an hour, you can't operate. 8 hours is the demarcation line between critical and not critical. And that's only important when you have to make strategic decisions about how you're going to invest in shoring up any of these things with control measures or mitigation measures. So if you have something, you have 3 different processes. The first one, it cannot be down for more than an hour. The second one cannot be down for more than 4 hours. The third one can be down for 12 hours before it causes issues. So you're going to spend more time on the one that needs to be down, cannot be down for more than an hour, and the one that cannot be down for more than 4 hours, than the one that can't be down for 12 hours, because that is no longer critical. However, just the time alone doesn't necessarily dictate that, because if something in that 12-hour thing is dependent for the 1 hour thing to happen, that all of a sudden becomes more important, because without that operation that needs to be up and running in more than 12 hours, that 1 hour thing's going to fail without it. So that all of a sudden that becomes more important. And this is a very drawn out process. I'm getting super in the weeds about this a little bit, but don't worry. This is how you figure out what your critical systems are and what you really need to be shoring up so you can have your doors open and cash flowing in the face of a disaster or disruption. Now, I've been talking about disaster and disruptions. There are 2 different things. And this is where I'm putting on my emergency manager hat. I could talk at great depth. And I noticed as people were chiming in the chat, we're all over the place. This is not just Wisconsin. So there are 2 types of disasters, and then there's disruption. So the disasters are natural and man-made. They're limited by geography and seasons, although the seasons are getting fuzzier now with climate change. And the main concerns are thunderstorms, severe storms, or tornadoes. The things about thunderstorms is they drop a lot of water. They cause a lot of flash flooding. And flooding is the natural disaster that causes the most amount of damage and deaths. The other natural disaster, I'm using air quotes, is heat. FEMA has not actually qualified heat events as natural disasters. There's currently legislation to change that right now in Congress. There's a lot tied to that, but they don't consider that for FEMA's purposes. Heat is not an actual natural disaster, but it is something that kills a lot of people every year annually across the globe. And the thing about hurricanes and flooding is when people have insurance, they don't necessarily have flood insurance because it's not the same as their home insurance. They're operating out of their homes. Now, power outages are both hot and cold events. If it's hot, there's too much draw on the power grid. Everybody has their ACs on. power grid has more of a draw on it ever since everybody's working from home. Because instead of being in one building with the air conditioning on from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., now everybody's home has the air conditioning on from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. when it used to be off because they were at work. Cold events, that impacts travel on the roadways because of ice, but it also creates ice on the power lines, which will cause them get too heavy. They will fall and cause power outages. Earthquakes, they are both natural from seismology, where you just have the plates shifting. But you also have earthquakes from fracking, which is a human caused event. If you are in Texas or Oklahoma, there has been a like 85% increase in the amount of earthquakes because of one of the processes for wastewater with fracking. It actually injects in millions of pounds per second wastewater back into the earth. So that causes some friction. And these are things that people are now having to deal with, they never had to deal with before. Infectious diseases are natural. People think that it's man-made, they're natural. So a pandemic. Wildfires, of course, big issue. Instead of having a fire season, it seems to be year-round. And the problem is that they're getting more intense, because part of the problem is the things that people do to mitigate these wildfires, which is like burning the brush and whatnot. A lot of people don't like that there's burning going on. They don't like the smell. So the counties tend to not do it as often as they should because they don't like upsetting their citizens. Another thing is people moving to the disasters. You see this with the wildfires, and you see this a lot with hurricanes. It's not necessarily that they're getting more powerful. Yeah, they are, but they're more expensive and cause more damage because more people are moving to these things. And you may think, well, this is not in my area. Well, if it's not in your area, if you're a fully remote company, someone you work with probably lives in one of those areas, or a vendor or supplier you do business with is in one of these areas that suffers through one of these natural disasters. So it is going to impact your business. And then droughts. The curious thing about droughts is it takes a couple of years before you realize you're in it. And then once you're in it, getting out of it is a couple more years afterwards. So it's like the impacts stay. You can say, oh, we had 3 great years of rain, but it doesn't make up for 5 years of drought. It's unfortunately doesn't work that way with droughts. That also impacts commercial waterway movement. So river levels have gone down substantially, which impacts the way that things are shipped. It's a lot cheaper to put things on a boat, but boats can't be that heavy if the water level has gone down. So you need to put things back on trucks, which increases the cost. A lot about supply chain architecture there. Man-made is pretty much done by, it's the misuse or misapplication or somebody messing up a structure or technology or process that we have invented as part of modern life. So the most prevalent ones are cyber attacks with ransomware, active shooters, and hazmat events. So cyber attacks, it is pretty much a given that this is a problem, and they pretty much expect everybody to get some level of a cyber attack. And small businesses might think, oh, I don't need to worry about this, I'm small. That's exactly the opposite of how you should be thinking, because cyber criminals are lazy. They like to work smarter, not harder. And if you're an easy target because you don't have any kind of sophisticated cyber or IT system as part of your business, they're going to target you. They did it to Martha's Vineyard ferry system a couple of years ago because why not? Because they could, basically. They do it to hospitals. They do it to schools. They really raked in a lot of money over the pandemic, right when it happened, because everybody was shifting quickly. And when you pivot quickly, you do it sloppy, especially if you've never done it before. So left a lot of vulnerabilities. Now, the thing about active shooters, I checked this yesterday. The numbers are only accurate as of August 27th. For a mass shooting event, it needs to be 4 people are killed, not including the shooter. And it was a very busy Labor Day weekend, which came after the number that I looked up last night. There have been over 470 mass shooting events in the United States in this year so far. And you're like, what? I've only heard about like 5 of them. Only the big ones get on the news. These are happening all the time. They are a legitimate concern. And what used to be the normal practice and how you defend against an active shooter has changed. They used to say the last thing you will ever do is attack and go against an active shooter. They realize that doesn't work. That actually hurts. So now one of the last steps is to defend yourself and actually go after the active shooter. Now, hazmat events happen a lot because of transportation. You'll mostly see them on the highways. Part of the reason is they these events aren't necessarily happening in the factories. A lot of it just because you're adding new factors into moving the hazardous material along travelways, which is why a lot of our hazmat material in the US gets shipped along the railways, because it actually decreases the amount of incidents that happen, and they're not on the roadways. They're fine. By and large, they are fine on the rails. You're going to be like, hey, but Erica, what happened in Palestine just recently? Well, yep, that's it on the right. On the left is it was a chemical plant in Texas that exploded because certain materials were not stored correctly, and they were warned that they were not stored correctly, and it caused this big explosion. And that was like 2 or 3 years ago, by Port Arthur, by the Houston area. But the thing with the derailment in East Palestine, that was due to some brake issue that used to be required for them to have changed. And then, I'm not getting political, I'm just saying that the requirement under the last administration was changed, and said they didn't have to make this change. So they didn't. If you don't have to change brakes, you don't. So part of the problem that the train derailed is because of the brakes were too worn. And yeah. So now we're going on to disruptions. Disruptions are incidents, small and large, which are detrimental to your continuous operations. That could be a key piece of machinery not working, or a really influential leader all of a sudden not being there anymore because they died. That gets into succession as well. So concerns for small businesses, you have regulations. Whether or not a regulation can put you out of business if you're not following it. A regulation can put more of an onus on you to spend more money to become compliant with it so you can run. That may put you out of business for a little bit while you're trying to navigate that. Succession. So again, if you have a key leader who leaves, even if it's a knowledgeable person who is leaving, and all of a sudden you don't know what to do anymore because that person's now gone, how are you going to continue your business? So there are certain agreements that can be put in place. There can be trainings that can be done. There can be things. When I was in the military, we called them continuity books. So we'd start building them from the minute that we got into our job, because we move our jobs a lot. And the continuity book is, this is everything you need. These are the main documents and the main resources I get to. These are the main annual recurring projects that we do. And you're setting up the next person for success. Supply chain, that's going to affect everybody based on the weather, based on the economies of the world. That is an issue. Reliance on the internet. So a lot of small businesses are completely on the internet, but the internet goes down, the cloud goes down. If you have a online store on Instagram or Facebook, and that's your thing, you can get shut out of either of those things. You can be put in Facebook jail for 30 days without the ability to contact anybody, because you never actually took that information offline. You never took and backed up any information you have offline, so you have access to it. You're letting one person, and that's Facebook, well, now Meta, control that. That is a single point of failure. That is a mistake. And then quality consistency. So if you have to get something from somewhere else, are your customers going to get the same product, the same quality product they got last time? That's something that they're going to be looking for and need to be careful of when you're looking at different suppliers for things. So the assets in your business that need protection are your products. So if you're making a product, you need to be able to store them somewhere. You're going to be able to make sure that you can actually make them. Your storage facilities. So are you somebody who has their business out of their home? Is your storage facility your garage? Or do you have it in a warehouse? And if it's in your garage and you have chemicals, let's say you're a woodworker or a painter, or you do hair coloring out of your garage or your home, you have to store chemicals in a certain way. Another thing, in addition to that, you should be letting the local police and fire department know what kind of chemicals, if you are working from home and you have these chemicals in your house, what you have. So in the event that you have a fire, they know what's going on in your house and what is a potential hazard to them and could cause the fire to get worse. So disclosing that as part of your business is really important. The delivery method you rely on, that is part of supply chain. Your employees, you need to protect your employees, because if they're not there, who's doing the work? The work still needs to get done. And then your reputation, that is an asset That is an asset that you need to protect. If you are the only business amongst your competitors that is still operational, your reputation goes through the roof. That is amazing if that's something that you can do, and make sure it doesn't degrade because you've gone offline, or your ability to provide your services or products has been impacted and is now less because you've not done business continuity. So how to evaluate the impact? There's various lenses you need to be looking through. The first is a customer. How is the customer going to view these things? So if your customer knew that you had no plan and you were just rolling the dice, do you think that they'd want to do business with you? That, of course, will impact your financial lens. Your financial lens is, okay, do I want to invest this money in this? Do I want to ride this out? Do I want to spend my money here? Regulatory, again, how that's going to impact your business. If you are a business that needs to be regulated and you're actually doing everything that you need to do, you're going to sail through smoothly. You're going to sail through smoothly. I don't know where that came from. Through any type of check that they do on you, any kind of investigation. That is really important. Operationally, you're going to think about, well, what do I need to do here? Do I need to do this? Actually, I want to go back to regulatory for a second. I kind of forgot this point. One of the impacts, you're going to decide whether or not you're going to adhere to regulations. And an example would be Experian. And they get a lot of fines for not protecting client data because of cyber incidents. Now, have they done everything that they can do to prevent that from happening? They've not. For them, it is just a cost of doing business to pay the fines that they pay the regulators. When they're making a couple of $1 billion a year annually, and their fines are only 22 million, that is a drop in the bucket. They don't care. They don't. So try not to be like Experian. Human will impact operational. Now, that is not your customer. The human is the employees that you have. Human is also your community around you. So if you happen to be, for example, doing some kind of chemical business, if you have a leak and things spill and it goes into the water table, you're now having an impact on the environment. So you want to make sure that you're handling things from an environmental perspective really well. And again, your reputation is an asset. It's not just like you look at through your reputation and you decide, this is how it's going to be seen. This is how I want to be seen. And this is the projection I have for why I need to have this level of protection. So what is your plan if you had to stop right away with no prediction of the future? Do you have that plan? Are you confident that your business can go on if you had to stop? I'm hoping so. And if you don't now, hopefully you will. So business continuity is in two phases. We already talked at length about the first ones. Reduction is that risk assessment where you're going through everything and you're making sure that you have no single points of failure and you have your control measures. Now, the response is the business impact analysis. That is where your risk management is going to fail. So you come in with your business continuity plan. That is the actual plan. The business continuity plan is the response. The execution is actually using the business continuity plan to recover from a disruption so you can resume basic operations. You want to resume your critical operations. The restoration and return is you're restoring your business and return to normal. But what is normal at this point? Is it the old normal or is there a new normal? So the pandemic caused a lot of people to have a new normal because we're all doing everything on Zoom. Some people think that's annoying, but other people think that's wonderful because now, like even today, there are people in Florida, there are people in Wisconsin, there are people in California, all able to attend one event because you have a Zoom meeting capabilities to do this. So at the end of the day, you have to choose between being just in case versus just in time. And just in time may be too late. You may have nothing. So you want to do prepare versus repair. So some common small business risks. I want to explain the difference between a sole and single source. A sole source means it is the only place you can get that thing. The only one in the world you can get that thing. Single is there are a couple of different places, but you choose the one that you want to get it from. So kind of like dating, you choose whether or not you want to be single. Now, why this is a common business risk, I have a client, she is an Etsy shop owner. One of her big things, she does crystals. She wants to make sure that all of her crystals are real and ethically sourced. she realized after working with me that her vendor and supplier came out of Houston, Texas, which happens to have a lot of flood and hurricane risks. So she's like, wow, I need to do more research and find a backup person so I can be seamless. If a hurricane's coming to Houston, I'm going to change my orders for the next week to go to somewhere else. And I know my products are still the same quality that I want. So if you have a home office and workspace, you have to treat that home office as if it's an office. So, if your office building, you need to know where the shutoff valves are. You need to know that for your house now, because your house is now your office. Your internet practices for IT and cyber, make sure you're using multi-factor authentication for a lot of things. That is one of the most secure ways to do things. It's really easy to do as well, to set those up on your systems. For product liability, you have regulatory compliance. You have to worry about whether or not you have an environmental impact. Maybe there's a recall and you're going to not just have to pull back your product and stop selling. You have to let your clients and customers know what's going on. For manufacturing, you may think you're letting everything ride on one thing, but it's a fad. So it's not going to sell. So all those people who bought hordes and hordes and hordes of hand sanitizer during the pandemic, a lot of them are stuck with hordes and hordes and hordes of hand sanitizer because they weren't able to sell them, because the market pulled through and was able to produce enough for everybody else to get them. Product lead time exposure means I say I'm going to get this to you in 48 hours because I can make it in 48 hours. Well, if it needs to be made and there are parts that are required to be sent in from somewhere else, you may not be able to do that. Or it may even be something as simple as, I promise to get this digital product turned around to you in 2 days, but the vendor I use, their system went down and they couldn't work for a week. Now that's impacting how you do your client services. We talked about environmental risk, and inventory, again, out of stock exposure is similar to lead time exposure. And your storage requirements. If you have something that is hazardous, if you're using chemicals, you have to know how to store them correctly and make sure that the local authorities, especially if you're operating your home, even if you're not operating at home, if you have a business, let the local authorities who may have to show up to put out a fire know that there may be, acid on the grounds. That's important for them to know. So beyond your immediate footprint, the supply chain architecture is an interesting thing to think about. It's really unprepared. It's if you thought about it, like back in the day, air traffic control used to not have the list of everything coming in by the minute. And it was kind of like, we think they're coming in around this time. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if planes landed that way now? But unfortunately, supply chain shipping industry is very much like that. They still don't have, like, their manifests are on paper. They don't match them up. They don't really know when anything's coming in. They need to really fix that. So they don't have real-time tracking and they don't collaborate. Hopefully after the pandemic, they realize how important it is to do that, and they will. So talk about all this terrible stuff. Let's hear some good stuff. This is basically like Oprah saying, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. These are all the benefits you get from having a business continuity plan. It's your return on investment. Yay. So for every $1 you spend in preparation and mitigation of any kind of issue you have, it's like figuring out your single points of failure, putting control measures in, you will save $7 in the back end. What that means is if you're spending it now, and then you wait till the disaster happens, everything is going to be 7 times more expensive to fix. Either because people are saying, hey, this is now in more demand. This service, this product that you need to fix this is more in demand now because everybody else is suffering through the same thing. So I'm going to charge a lot more money for it. Or you have to put people off of their jobs to do this, and they are now using their salary to go backwards and fix something and not actually work and create something current. So there's a big money thing. You get to keep your cash flow. You get to keep your capital. It keeps coming in because your doors don't have to close. You get insurance discounts up to 20% off your premium. So if you have business interruption insurance or any kind of business insurance, they will give you a discount up to 20% on your premium. You are making money back in perpetuity. Think of it again like car insurance. If you have an alarm or day running lights on your car, you get a discount. Why? Because they want to reward you for taking care of something. They want to reward you for the fact that either you may not have to make a claim, or if you do make a claim, it's a lot less than they were expecting it to be. You also get to know your business. Remember, I talked about in the business impact analysis assessment, you're going to find out what your real critical operations are. You're going to know, like, oh no, I didn't realize this one thing I need to be operating can't be down for more than an hour. And this other thing that I'm like, oh, it's fine, it's 12 hours. No, actually, that 1 hour thing requires that to be going. You get to know your business inside and out. You increase your resilience and your ability to have succession for your business to continue on if you've taken care of this. And you get to grow. You have a solid base from which to grow. And I am going to give you a story of another client. This is a solopreneur who has a bakery in France. She makes cupcakes out of her home. And when she read my book and was like, hey, I learned a lot about business continuity, but I don't think I can do any of it until I grow. And I said, hold my beer. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So I started asking questions like, a 5-year-old would ask. I'm like, well, how do you make cupcakes? Well, I have this, this, and this. I said, okay, well, where are you getting those from? Oh, I have this supplier. Do you have just one supplier? Yes. I said, okay, what if they can't provide? Oh, okay, yeah. All right, so what else do you need? You need a kitchen, right? Yeah, I need a kitchen. I said, so you have a stove, was it running gas or electric? Gas. I said, what if the gas goes out in your house? Oh, I said, do you have another neighbor who will let you cook in there? Oh, I never asked. I said, what if it's a neighborhood-wide gas outage? Can you go to somewhere else? Do you have another kitchen you can cook in? No. I said, all right, let's go to electric, because you need electric for beaters, right? To make your icing. She's like, yeah. I go, do you have a safety supply stock of icing? She's like, what's that? I'm like, how much can you make in advance? And she's like, well, room temp icing can go for a week. If it's refrigerated, it's a month. If it's frozen, it's 6 months. I go, okay, let's say your daughter has to go to the ER. And same time you have a client order due in an hour. If you have a safety supply stock, you don't have to make a decision between the two. You can fulfill both. And she was like, wow, I got a lot of work to do. And when I followed up with her weeks later, she said, not only did she do everything, she did a lot more, because she started thinking about her other single points of failure. She said, I didn't think I could use business continuity until I grew. Now I know I cannot grow until I do business continuity. That's really what I hope everybody to understand. It doesn't matter what size you are. You can do this at any point. And this interaction I had with her actually wound up in my book, because I realized, I was like, if she didn't get it, I'm missing something. So I wrote a chapter about her. So another analogy I talked about earlier, you want to get to your destination. You want your goal with the least amount of discomfort possible. You all do business continuity. You all do it every single day. So let's say you want to go for a run. The first thing you're going to do is check the weather app. See what the temperature is, see if it's going to be raining. That's going to impact what time you go and what you're wearing. Now, if you lived somewhere else, that's also going to change what time you go, what you're wearing. This is all one single data point that makes you agile. It gives you a series of decisions to make off of that one piece of data. That is what business continuity does. It allows you to be prepared to meet your goal with the least amount of discomfort possible. I will never promise you'll be comfortable. You can be the most comfortable you have your control over, but you'll still get there. So things you can do now. Talk about insurance. Like I said, it just transfers the risk, but it doesn't hurt to have it, especially if you have a business in your home. Let people know that what you have in your business, because if you have to get anything replaced, if something does happen terrible, if the insurance company doesn't know that it exists, they're not going to pay you for it. You have an alert system. That's an easy thing to set up with your HR, or even just do a text chain to make sure that everybody's accounted for. Now, this is a fun fact, not really fun, but it's a fact. The fire department will not put out a fire if they think people are still in the building. They will do search and rescue first. So if you don't know that Jim went out for lunch for 2 hours and never bothered coming back, and you think he's still in the building, you're putting firefighters at risk by making them go in the building and look around for somebody who's not there. And you're also making sure that that building burns to the ground, whether it's your house or an office building, because they will not put out a fire while they're looking for somebody. You need to get everybody involved into care. This is really important. Make them realize that this is something that is vital to keeping the business going and operating, keeping everybody employed, keeping customers happy. It is something that is a effort, not just an extra duty. It is an extra effort for everybody to make sure that your business is thriving. You want to back up your vital records. You want to make sure they're in a fire safe or waterproof box, and not just your incorporation documents. You also want to, in the event you have to apply for grants or a loan in the aftermath of a disaster, you're going to want to make sure that you have the front and back of your ID photocopied. You want to have some of your tax returns in there. You want to have your banking statements for like the last 6 months in there. You want to have something accessible that they think that you think you're going to need to apply for the stuff to prove who you are, to prove your credit worthiness and all that. So make sure it's in a safe box and it's backed up. You can do training and emergency response. I did look up for Wisconsin. It's weird. They're called CERT teams. FEMA has them out. They're Community Emergency Response Team, CERT. If you just do CERT Wisconsin, there's another CERT that is part of the correctional facilities. Don't do that one. So, but there are ones like Milwaukee has one, Madison has one. You can normally find them through your local town emergency management department. Either go to the city hall or go through the fire department or the police department and ask them. These are free trainings for everybody in the business to basically learn CPR, learn to do things to respond. They love training people because it means that they don't have to hurry up and do the work themselves. They can get there. Because here's the thing too, when you call 911, they're not there like that. And oftentimes, if it's a big disaster, they're suffering through the same disaster you are. So they're not going to be able to get to you. You and your neighbors and your coworkers are going to be your first responders. You want to get certifications and things like CPR. And you have grant money hoops. There's a beautiful, beautiful grant called the Readiness for Resiliency. It is co-sponsored by FedEx and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And it is a $5,000 grant if you are in a declared disaster area after disaster is hit, and you have registered in advance before the disaster hit, and you have a business continuity plan, and you show them this, they will give you $5,000 free and clear to help you recover. So you want to assess your own weaknesses and needs because we all have them. And even if you have a business continuity plan, you need to kind of train on and exercise it so you know what to do. So what are your biggest threats? Are there any single points of failure? And are there any controls for them? Are you brittle or flexible? Because you don't want to be brittle because you will break. Flexible means you can move and ride with it. Can you afford to be down a few weeks, a few days, or is a few hours too long? You're going to figure that out. What will your market tolerate? And what resources do you need? It's one thing to identify them, and do you have them is the second thing. You have to go out and get them. Is there an alternative site? Can you make your cupcakes somewhere else? Can you manufacture somewhere else? Can you work somewhere else? If you are working from home and a hurricane hits you, can you go somewhere else and do your work? Can you go visit a family or a friend somewhere in some other city? How much of the business relies on communication systems? You got to put a lot of backups into that and make sure it's all updated and accurate. And how will you communicate any of this to your stakeholders? People need to know what's going on. And do you know how to coordinate with external agencies? These are the police. These are the fire department. You want to establish your relationship with them early. They really like it when you go over and say, hi, and this is what I want to do. They get excited that you're being proactive. Do not be shy. Go out and do this. And who's going to be responsible for it all? It's a great thing to be like, this is what we want, but somebody has to be responsible for it to make sure it actually happens. So we all need to do our part to be available, to be part of this beautiful cycle of dream makers and people spending their money from other dream makers. You are a community asset because you are a business, and you stay viable when you secure your assets with a plan, survive the disruption, and thrive afterwards. So thank you. That's me. You can reach me directly by emailing me or go to my website. On my website, you can, there's a link to my book, which is available on Amazon. There is a business readiness assessment test. It's kind of like a Cosmo quiz. It's on the main page. And you can click that and find out how ready your business is. And you can find out about the result. You'll get your results. We can discuss them with me afterwards. And I have a blog on there, and I have a whole bunch of podcasts that I've been on that you can just listen to by topic. So with that, I'll stop my share and see if there are any questions. And thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much for that, Erika. And yes, now would be a great opportunity for anyone to go ahead and get those questions that you had during the presentation, but to go ahead and kind of kick things off, I was curious if you might be able to share some or elaborate a bit more on some common misconceptions or mistakes that businesses make when it comes to planning for disruptions, and maybe just some more active ways on how to avoid them. I know you did a good job kind of at least highlighting some of those elements, but I was wondering maybe if you can elaborate a little bit further on just some of those misconceptions that some folks have when trying to account for some of the items that you had mentioned in your presentation.
So one of the biggest misconceptions is having a plan is enough. And it's like, okay, we got a business continuity plan, but if you don't train on it, you don't practice it, nobody knows what to do. And that is the thing. So a lot of the plan is, oh, if this happens, it's a decision tree. We're going to go from A to B, B to C, C to D. If you practice it, here's the thing, and I'm not saying I'm guilty of it. I've experienced this myself when I was an emergency operations center legal advisor. That's the thing. I was a lawyer. Forgot to mention that. I had to sign in every month to the system. So I knew like we can send a message. Do you think I remembered the password or the login to that system? Even if they made us do it every month? No, I had to write it somewhere, but that was part of the practice. I mean, they should have done it more often, but it's a thing that if you're not practicing, it doesn't become part of your bandwidth. It doesn't become part of your muscle memory. So the ideal thing is if you're practicing and exercising these things, if you're ever in a situation where you're going from A to B and you want to get to D, so you go A to B, B to, oh no, there's no C. What do I do? What do I do? It empowers you because you've done it before. You want to get to D. You can figure out how to get there. Instead of a plan, it becomes a playbook. So that's the thing. Like, it's great. Congratulations. You have a business continuity plan. You've done nothing with it though. And the other thing too is when you're practicing, let's say you have an offsite location you want to go to, like everybody has to go there. Let's say, the first time you rehearse this, oh, okay, it took us 20 minutes to get there. That's fine. But the next time you're doing it for real, there is city planned construction for a new sewer line. So there's detours everywhere and nobody knows where to go and it's going to take even longer. So when you expect, again, about accountability, you expect people to be there in 20 minutes, it's going to take a lot longer and everyone's going to be trickling in. These are things that people need to be doing. That's first and foremost. The other is you bought it. If you didn't buy the control measure, that's one thing. It's like, okay, we need this. Well, okay, get it. And then the second thing is install it. There is a situation where they had to fight tooth and nail for these people to get a generator. But one of the old school board members hated it. He's like, it's ugly. I don't want it on the building. So they never connected it because he refused to let it go on the building. So they had it and they never connected it. And then they lost power. And because they didn't have a generator as a backup, they actually lost a lot of their data as well that was unrecoverable. So that's just some examples.
Thank you for that. We had a question that came in from Warren. So what is the appropriate role or position in a small business to own and champion a continuity program? So what is the appropriate role in your opinion or position within a small business to own and champion a continuity plan?
I think it's everybody's role. It's everybody's responsibility. So it depends on what departments you have. And every department should have a subject matter expert who is responsible for this and not just as an extra duty. I advocate for this to be part of the job description because if anything is an extra duty, it falls to the wayside and it just doesn't get done. If it's part of your job, you make sure it gets done. Now, in larger companies, they have business continuity programs. So they have an actual business continuity person whose job it is to do the plan and do trainings and do awareness programs to make sure that everybody else in the company knows that this thing exists and that they have a part in it. Now, it's not that everybody needs access to the plan. It's the subject matter expert, the leader of whatever department has that access. They know what the plan is, and they need to be able to make sure that their team understands that this is a thing and gets everybody involved and gets everybody to care. And that is really where the magic happens, when people care and they are involved. And I see the only way to do that really is to make it part of the job description, not just an extra duty.
Thank you so much for this, Erica. It looks like those are the questions that have come in this time. So still an opportunity for folks to get those last minute questions in if they wanted to do so. But at DreamBank, we are a community that is built up of fellow fearless dreamers, and we always like to poll our presenters. What's one piece of advice that you have for someone who's actively pursuing a dream right now?
It's something, right? So I've done everything. I was a corporate lawyer, then I joined the military, and then I left and did my, own company. My advice to any dreamer is don't follow the standard that the world has set up. Follow your own standard. So when I left corporate law, I took a $70,000 pay cut to join the Army. Does that make sense to many people? People are like, why would you do that? And then when I was leaving the Army, I put in my paperwork to leave in January 2020. And that's when the pandemic hit right after. I was not expecting that to happen. So I could have pulled back my paperwork and stayed on active duty, but I didn't want to do that. That would have made sense to everybody else, but it didn't make sense to me because it's not what I wanted to do. So every step of the way, I used to say, I don't know what I'd be when I grow up. And I realized, no, I always know what I want to be. I am wherever I am in that moment. And I have evolved to that person in that moment. And whoever's making the decision at that moment, which makes sense to them, it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else, is what I should be doing. So I have followed my dream for decades and I've not regretted it once.
I love that. I love that, Erika. Thank you so much for that. Thank you all for tuning in today, taking your time out of your day to join us. So thank you, Erika, for putting together this valuable presentation. With that being said, we will go ahead and cap this here and we will see you all next time. Take care.